Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here at Book Passage for our conversations with authors. My name is Cheryl Bronstein. I am one of the event coordinators here at Book Passage, an independent bookstore in the Bay Area that has been in business for over 40 years. And I want to thank all of our loyal customers and supporters for helping us to keep our doors open and the business flowing during this past almost 2 years. It's been quite a struggle, but Book Passage has 2 stores, our main store in Corte Madera and our store in San Francisco in the Ferry Building. And both stores are open, so please come in and browse, purchase books from today's event and any other titles. You can order online or come into the store in person or give us a call. We are always happy to help you. Also, for all of you business owners and corporate customers out there, Book Passage has a very thriving business-to-business operation. Books make the best gifts for your clients and your staff, and we can help you purchase and ship large orders with excellent customer service, attention, and very attractive discounts. So if this interests you, please call one of our stores and just say, I'm interested in corporate orders, and we'll get someone to help you. This afternoon, I am so thrilled to introduce our author, Madeline Levine. She is a total rock star. As a corporate book buyer at Book Passage, I can't even tell you how many hundreds, maybe thousands of Madeline's books I've ordered for schools, parent groups, companies, organizations. Her New York Times bestseller, The Price of Privilege, is a Marin County Bible. I don't think there is a parent or grandparent out there who has not heard or read The Price of Privilege and or Teach Your Children Well. These books prepare our kids for their certain to be uncertain future and help to ensure their lasting adaptability, resilience, and happiness. Madeline's new book, Ready or Not, Preparing Our Kids to Thrive in an Uncertain and Rapidly Changing World, is the follow-up to The Price of Privilege. And then this one explores why teens from affluent families are experiencing epidemic rates of emotional problems. Dr. Madeline Levine is a clinician, a consultant, an educator with over 25 years of experience. She lectures on parenting in the Bay Area and throughout the country. She was featured in the acclaimed documentary, A Race to Nowhere, which I know a lot of you have seen. And she's often interviewed by the press on parenting topics. So we see her on TV all the time. She's a New York Times bestselling author, a PhD, but most importantly, a proud mother of 3 newly minted sons and 3 grandchildren. Madeline is joined today by Michelle Borba, another total rock star. Michelle is an internationally recognized educator who has spoken to over 1 million parents and educators. She's recognized for her solution-based strategies on raising resilient kids. And she's appeared in over 150 times on the Today Show. She's been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time Magazine, and Dateline. Her 24 books are translated, get this, into 20 languages. And her latest book, Thrivers, The Surprising Reasons Why Some Kids Struggle and Others Shine, is also available at Book Passage. So it is a great pleasure and with admiration that I introduce to you today, Madeline Levine and Michelle Borba.
Oh, thank you, Cheryl. I get to be the one that's moderating this and interviewing Madeline Levine. Now, you need to know that number one, she is a rock star. Anybody out there, if you don't know her and her work, she's the one we put up on the pedestal, her clinician, her work, but she's also a friend. And you're going to see that part that's loud and clear. I love her book. This is the one that it's so well marked that the first thing I would suggest you do during this next hour is get a paper, because you're going to want to mark down some page numbers that I'm going to say, reference and look at it, because she's over the top in terms of understanding what our kids need. And so I'm going to turn this over to Madeline and ask the first most important question. Everybody read The Price of Privilege and we adore it. It's on all of our shelves. Then we read Teach Your Children Well. We also read See No Evil. Madeline, we've read your books. But there's something that has an urgency that really caught me, that I have read this 3 different times, and each time it just takes me up a different level. I'm going to ask you, why this one? Why now? And here we are in the middle of a crisis that's unprecedented. How's this one going to help us and our kids?
So this came out 2 weeks before lockdown. So I wasn't prescient. I didn't know there was going to be a pandemic, but I did know that the world was changing incredibly rapidly, and that the expired sort of educational paradigm that we were working on and parenting paradigm were going to be even more of a problem. But Michelle, the real reason I wrote the book was you and I are in the same sphere. We know that over the course of time that we've been working hard on the exact same issues with an entire cadre of psychologists and educators, that the rates of anxiety, depression, cutting, eating disorders, substance abuse have not gone down. They have gone up. And I was just looking at Price of Privilege, which is now 15, 17 years old. And I think the numbers I had in there was like 1 in 5 kids, 1 in 4 kids. Now it's 1 in 3. Since COVID, it's 1 in 2. Kids are having terrible problems. And, you know, I was thinking about this, suspecting you'd ask me this question, and they're prescient. And I thought about why I actually wrote it, besides the obvious. It's my thing, and I felt things were not getting better. And I felt that the people I was so accustomed to talking to had taught me what I needed to know. Educators, you know, my project down at Stanford, Challenge Success. And I felt like I had gotten as far as I could. And nobody knows better than you. You're on a plane twice a month. It's exhausting. And then to feel that that didn't really shift the national conversation. So I decided to talk not to educators and psychologists, but to people who live in the middle of change. And that's really the military and CEOs of big businesses. I wanted to see what I was missing in terms of, you know, not having to say one more time, kids are stressed, and how those arenas have made accommodations to be able to work in such an incredibly challenging environment. And then one more thing, I had a personal experience, because look, people push their kids because they want good things for them, right?
Yeah.
And we want, you know, you have kids, I have kids. We want to know that they're going to have a job, that they're going to make a living. And in talking to CEOs of big companies, it was incredibly clear that the skill set was not the primary concern, that creativity and collaboration, and, you know, I call them foundational skills. They used to be called soft skills, which I don't like. So that over and over, I heard the same thing. And then I had this experience of going for a mortgage at my bank. And my son, Jeremy, I have three grown sons now. And my son, Jeremy, then is about 19 maybe. And he wants to come along with me. And I say, fine. And we go to the bank, and I happen to get the head of the mortgage department. And so she and I have an hour of talking about mortgages. And my son, Jeremy, each one of your kids is a little different. My son, Jeremy, is just a great socio-emotional reader and kind. And over the course of that hour, twice he looks at his watch and he says, Mom, I'm afraid the meter's going to run out. Can I put a quarter in for you? Sure, thank you. And then one time, my voice is scratchy all the time. He said, I saw some tea and honey. Can I get you a cup of tea?
Aww.
And he turns to the head of the mortgage department and says, would you like some tea? She says, yes.
Aww.
And then she and I are just talking. And at the end, I get my mortgage, and she turns to my son and says, I want to offer you a job.
Oh,
now, she knows nothing about him, not whether he's in school, not whether he's a student, nothing. So, my jaw drops, and I'm like, what's that about? And she said, exactly what I've heard from all the other CEOs. I can teach him mortgage rates, Madeline. I can't teach him to say, would you like a cup of tea? And that's the kid I want sitting next to me. Now, I'm not saying that just being kind is enough, but it's a big part of things. The ability to be collaborative, to read the environment, to respond to the environment, but those are the things that are going to be needed. And that's not what we're doing right now.
Oh, I love that story. Absolutely love it. And I'm going to take you back 2 seconds here, because you also said something, you said everything brilliant, but you said, ready or not, if we want our kids not just to survive, but to thrive, we're going to have to adapt our parenting, our teaching, and our everyday concerns to a different kind of preparation that values a different kind of outcome. We change, or we and our children will most certainly be left behind. Oh, we should put that on a bumper sticker. But here's the point. You just had that experience with your son, and you read that and you got it. How do we flip the dime? Because what I'm seeing and reading so much of Ready or Not, our parenting is still left behind. We haven't quite caught up. What's going to take? We just hit a pandemic, but what else is it going to take so parents realize that we really are not doing our kids any justice if we don't teach them the skills you're talking about?
Well, one is these escalating rates of emotional problems. Yeah. And two, you said we just hit a pandemic. What else? The pandemic was a great exercise in seeing that there was a whole bunch of other things that you needed besides an A in calculus or AP, whatever, that you needed to know how to be with yourself, that you needed to be able to have a basket of skill sets, right? All of us, you and I included, everybody who's listening, to get through this last year and a half, you had to have in place something that you turn to in times of challenge. And life is filled with challenge. Michelle, the last talk I gave before lockdown was at Berks here in San Francisco. 500 people. And for whatever reason, it was right before the pandemic, no idea. I asked how many people in the audience haven't had a divorce, lost a loved one, had a serious illness, went into bankruptcy, had a divorce, all those things. Out of 500 people, 499 people raised their hand, right? That's life. That's what happens. And the one woman who didn't, I really worried about her going into the parking lot afterwards, like she had beat all the odds. Right?
Yeah.
But so we know that you need resilience in order to make it through life, just ordinary life. And what is resilience? Is there a resilience gene? No. Do we think that resilient people are particularly brave and talented? No. Resilience is a set of skills. And like any set of skills, it can be cultivated. And if this didn't teach parents that the most important things kids can have in a rapidly changing environment is resilience, I don't know what would teach them that. It was critical. And I had one other thought about this, which was we all started with our own particular toolbox. excuse me, my toolbox, my go-to always is writing. My dad died when I was young. I took up writing, and it's my go-to for when I'm stressed and challenged. And I realized we all thought COVID was going to be a couple of months, right? I realized that having one major resilience skill, creativity, was not enough. And I very intentionally said, I got to put a couple other things in that toolbox. In my case, it had to do with friendship, mostly, almost all of friendship. And that was a big addition. And I think that's what parents saw during this. They saw kids manage in the beginning, it was kind of like a free school day. But it's not enough. And I have a take on why kids are so lacking in resilience now, having to do with what they've been protected from and what they've been not allowed to experience in life. And that has to change.
You have such a positive attitude. I'm going to be the one, and I'm right there with you, Madeline. We are so in sync that my brain is somehow matched in your brain, which is one of the greatest compliments of my life in terms of sync with Madeline Levine. But I'm going to be the devil's advocate because I'm for the viewers who are here and they're worried about, is it too late? Can we really teach resilience? Now, everything in this book is all about, yes, we have a positive attitude, but can you really help parents realize that resilience is teachable so they can get their hands in this and start turning to chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 and put it into action?
So your first question was, why did I write it? And I know you to be actually more optimistic than I am. I am really sort of pessimistic by nature. And when I realized like things were not getting better, and my books were selling, but like there was no legislation, no big deal happened. And that could have been a moment for me personally, and think about your own family, of depression. I've done everything I could for 15 years and it hasn't moved the needle. And I think instead, hanging out with a more optimistic group of women has upped my optimism a little bit and made me feel like, okay, it's not that didn't work. It didn't work as well as you wanted it to.
Yeah.
What else can you do? Because the alternative to that was to, say goodbye to the people I treat and this whole world and go garden or bake or, and I didn't want to do that. So it was a way of taking control over a very difficult situation, was to say, okay, I'm kind of, knocked on my ass a little bit. I'm going to get up and try again. And perseverance. So that added perseverance and control. And those are two really big things. And I know your original question was, can parents teach it? Of course they can teach it. They teach a whole bunch of other things. Why can't they teach perseverance, right? Why can't they teach self-regulation? I see it with my 3-year-old granddaughter. She wants something right away, and her parents, she just turned 3, so this is leading up to this when she's 2. Her parents would say to her, wait a minute. They didn't say wait 10 minutes. They didn't say wait a day. They said, wait a minute. And once she could wait a minute, they made it 5 minutes. And once it was 5 minutes, it was in an hour. And that, what I don't understand actually, Michelle, is we know that everything takes practice. Speaking takes practice, writing takes practice, calculus takes practice, English literature takes practice. Well, so do the skills of resilience take practice. And kids have to do them over and over again without parents getting anxious about the fact that kids are right on that edge of what they can do easily. So this kind of hyper parenting, over parenting, helicopter parenting, whatever you want to call it, it's not good for kids because it robs them of the opportunity to develop resilience.
Oh, amen. And let's get to your soft skills, the so-called soft and fluffy ones that are transformational. You've listed so many powerful ones, from curiosity, creativity, flexibility, educated risk-taking, collaboration, perseverance, self-regulation, hope and optimism. I'm watching this as a mom or dad or grandparent or whomever, teacher. Where do I dig in? Where do I start? Where do I begin? Of all of those, what matters most to my child now?
Okay.
How do I choose?
I'm 40 years being an adolescent psychologist. There is no question in my mind. You want to pick one thing, pick self-regulation, because every single kid I have seen in 40 years in my office is a failure in self-regulation. Who comes in? The girl who's pregnant or has STD, the boy who's drinking and driving, the kid who's shoplifting. These are all failures in self-regulation. So that's my number one skill. And how does a parent teach that? I think it's by not excusing difficult behavior. So you have teenagers, you're going to come face to face with a loss of self, not a loss, I'm sorry, with a lack of self-regulation. Because I like stories. My story about self-regulation is my oldest son, Lauren, had an 18th birthday party, and we locked away all the liquor. My husband was in Tahoe. All the kids that I knew for a million years, no liquor, no nothing anywhere in the house. I go to upstairs, watch SNL, fall asleep. In the middle of the night, every emergency vehicle in Marin County is in my front yard. The EMTs, the sheriff, the cop, everybody. What happened? One of the kids had a panic attack, and my son doesn't get his psychologist mother. They call 911 because they were scared. And the police come, and you have a big decision there, right? What are you going to do with your kid who unintentionally, sort of blew this up in my face? I was cited, which would have had an impact on my license as a psychologist. And I get some variation of this all the time. My kid was caught drunk driving. I want to get a lawyer so that it doesn't ruin his future. My daughter was cheating on the SATs. I'm going to bankrupt the school if they don't let her pass anyway. All these kinds of awful moral decisions about how to treat kids who have not shown self-regulation. So my kid came with me to every criminal law interview I had to have, and paid for half of it. And I think if he was sitting here with me, he would say that was the smart thing to do. It did not ruin his life. He's now a lawyer himself. I don't know.
I was going to ask you on the trajectory of what he currently does. Way to go, Madeline.
He's a lawyer. And so when you look for, you don't have to make opportunities. This, like the stuff about fail. Kids should all fail. Your child should fail. It's great if they fail. 3 kids. I didn't love the idea of my kids failing, and I don't like it framed that way. The military calls it getting better faster, and I think that's right. I think that's a much better way of looking at it. So when your kid exhibits a lack of self-regulation, there are consequences to it, and as unhappy as it makes us feel, that's okay. We have to learn to sit with our own discomfort about our kids' anxiety, about our kids losing something in there. And, all my books read like they're about children. They're really all about parents, because we know that to the extent to which you and I and the audience of moms and dads, there's more research on moms, are doing okay, our kids are much more likely to do okay. And to the extent to which we're not, our kids are not going to do okay. So it always, it's always like what to tell the kids. But my own point of view is your kids co-regulate with you, right? They don't, especially if they're on the younger side. Yeah. So to the extent to which you can handle anxiety, which you're going to have, challenge, fear, all those things, your child will be better able to. And I think there's an interesting neuropsych and neuroendocrine psych reason for that. When we get nervous, there's something called the HPA, the hypothalamus pituitary axis, and that gets activated. And that's where we get cortisol. People are always talking about cortisol. But when that happens to us, it happens to our children as well. And that's because we are exhibiting unpredictability, and unpredictability is one of the things that raises anxiety. So the tie between moms and kids, and dads, I'm sorry, it's just we have so much more research on mothers, cannot be overestimated.
I love all of that. I'm again applauding naturally with you, because one of the things that I was struck with, Madeline, is how often you talked about the parental anxiety and how it's spilling down to us. Okay, now we've all come through 2 years of, or plus, whatever it is right now, amazing uncertainty. And it's a rare parent out there who's going to say, I've been calm. I've been exactly how I want to model to my child. We don't. So what are some techniques for those of us out there, or who say, I get it, I'm not as relaxed as I should be? How do we help ourselves so we don't spill it over to our kids?
So, that's a great question, because it seemed to me when COVID started, every person had a list. Every speaker had a list to put up on your board. Bake, eat well, sleep well, get rid of
bubble baths.
Right.
That was like always there.
Right. And, particularly sleep and exercise and eating, those are good ideas. But I think all of us, like, you can't see my office here, I've got 1,000 books in it. And my job was I was going to organize my books. Well, it's almost 2 years later, and they are not in the least bit organized, nor is my closet, nor is a bunch of other things. I think the best way to handle anxiety is to keep it small, is to start with something is nurturing to you. It's an embarrassment. I'll tell you what it is for me. I have watched all 70 episodes of Bosch, and I have read now 6 of his books, the books about him. I know that reading chills me out. Now, if you have 3 kids at home and you're working a job or 2 jobs, and childcare is a problem, I want to be really clear about this. We're talking about 2 different worlds that experience COVID. And I don't want anybody thinking I'm not aware of that. I am very aware of the fact that for half the kids in this country, COVID was not just a challenge, it was an enormous undertaking. And I think we expect that those kids are going to be behind educationally, they're going to need mental health support. I have a particular point of view, and I know a lot of people disagree with me. I think for the most part, our kids will be okay. I think for the most part. And I think there's a tremendous amount of pathologizing going on about what's happening to kids. Every article you read is 100% of kids are messed up now. Kids have been through World War I, World War II, the Great Depression. They have been through very difficult things before. And here's a story that I like. It's about the research, which of the kids who stayed with their parents during the Blitz and those who were taken to the countryside. And it's a complicated story, in fact. But the finding was that the kids who stayed with their parents in the middle of the Blitz did better than the kids who didn't have their parents out in the countryside. And that's like that's a tough one to really get behind. But the story I like is this mom, the house explodes, is bombed, the windows blow out, and this mom takes her kid with a lot of facial lacerations to an emergency room. And she gets to the ER with her kid and says to the doctor, "We're so lucky. My husband is a carpenter and he's at home replacing the windows." And I've thought about that story a lot in terms of what constitutes resilience. Obviously, optimism was in there. And I also wondered if that was the kind of person who actually kept their kids with them, the kind of person who knew they could protect their kid under very challenging circumstances. But for the most part, kids have come through. Will there be ups and downs? Absolutely. But if we can move forward with a sense of courage and bravery and optimism, I think that our kids will. And that takes some change on our part. My greeting to my kids when they were younger was, is everything okay? They'd come home from school, is everything okay? Right? Good Jewish mother, is everything okay? And they pointed out that was not the greatest greeting, right? And I think a lot of parents are always on the alert for what went wrong. And I think instead of, are you okay? It should be something like, I think you can do this, or tell me about something that was really cool, or what are you looking forward to? I think those are all ways that parents calm themselves. Remember, it's not like parents out there and kids are out there. There is a co-regulation, like I said, that goes on between parents and kids in the same way that when we're in an airplane and there's a lot of turbulence, right? I don't know about you, but I look right at the stewardess like, are we in trouble or not? And if she's cool, which she is all the time, then I'm cool. That's what I mean by co-regulation. And so it's been hard to do that through this period of time. And for people who have had the ability to work at home and have food and all that kind of stuff, I think we'll come through okay. For people who didn't, I think it's a different story.
Oh, it's so affirming. And I love, love, love your story. I love Anna Freud's research that you just were citing. And I love how you mentioned it all in your book. And I think it goes back to, you mentioned the word optimism, page 142 and 143, everybody start reading it because it's so critical, which she starts by saying that we do know that children who are optimists are happier and they're healthier. But we also know something else. This is the quote that just had me sitting up and underlining it 50 times. Madeline says, childhood pessimism is the precursor to adult pessimism and is associated with depression. So dealing with it early is important. And then we look at the CDC that warns us we're all depressed, we're all anxious. We're talking about the grown-ups, not the kids. So how are you going to help children, or maybe it's us, negate all those negative consequences? You've got a great story about Ashley in your book. You have wonderful stories. Right. But I love one of your patients, Ashley, and how you helped her because she was always the negative. Everything was ruminating and finding the worst in anything. And that's what we tend to do right now. We're only finding the worst.
That's right. And that's what I said about pathologizing.
Yes.
So your kid's in bed for a day, or your kid's angry for a few hours here and there, expectable. Don't pathologize that. That's not mental illness. And I can talk later about what you should worry about, but it's not that. What is pessimism? There's 3 P's to pessimism, right? Personal, pervasive, and permanent. And that's what that kind of thinking is. So the kid like Ashley who says, I'll never get it. I'm just stupid. I can't do it, right? They get a poor grade on a test or fall off a bike or whatever it is. And your job, which is the therapist's job, but it's an easy job, you all can do it, is to reframe that thinking for your child. I failed the test, I'm stupid. I think what you mean is you failed that test and that was hard for you. What can you do next time? So you're always kind of looking for the alternate to that personal, permanent, and pervasive. No, my best friend didn't sit with me at lunch. Nobody likes me. Oh, did you sit with somebody else? Well, yeah, but she was my best friend. So I guess somebody likes you. I mean, you're really correcting thinking. This is what cognitive behavioral therapy is. It's why I'm not thrilled with things like trigger warnings and that kind of stuff, because I think I've made it clear. I think facing challenge is exactly how we get stronger. So I have this saying about the dog, because years ago when I saw kids who were a little younger, it was always some variation of the dog story, which would be a kid comes in and the dog down the block or on the next block was barking and it scared the 8-year-old and he doesn't want to go see the dog again. He won't walk to school and he won't go on the block. And the parent has 3 options. You can either say, oh yeah, that was awful. I don't want you going near that dog. We'll go another way from now on. or the parent can say, man up, it's just a dog, forget about it, it's not going to hurt you. Or the parent can use authoritative parenting, which is, supportive and high demands. And that's, I understand that you're afraid of the dog. What would help you? The kid says, nothing, I don't want to go near him. And the mom says, well, that's the way you walk to school. If you'd like me to walk with you for a day or two, I'm happy to do it. That's exactly what we do in the office. We never say, never go near dogs again. I mean,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We always try to break it into manageable pieces that a child can handle.
I love that tip, because I think that's what we do. You write so much about the over rescuing and the lawn mowing and the overprotecting. And of course, we love our kids desperately and we don't want them to fail. But you bring out some powerful points on how that kid has to be able to handle little dosages of stress outside his comfort zone. If you could expand on that one so we all feel better and don't want to go running in there to pick up the pieces for our kid, when in reality we can say, oh, I'm doing him a favor instead.
Right. So I think you have to think of short-term and long-term in this. And because our children are grown up, we get to think long-term or see the results of long-term. We get to see the results of long-term.
Yeah.
So in the moment, it's anxiety provoking, right? If your kid is anxious about something, excuse me, you're going to be anxious about it. That's just the way. And if you're an anxious person, even more so. So, you're going to have to tolerate some of the anxiety that you're feeling. And you're going to have to allow your kid to get to, what we call the ZPD, zone of proximal development, that area where it's really not clear if he can or can't do it, and let him try, right? And let your child try. And when we get too fearful of that, we, like I said, and I think of it as robbery. We think of it as, oh, we're doing such a favor to our kid. And I don't fully understand because we have young grandchildren, so we've seen them learn to walk, right? And they take a few steps and they fall down, just like our kids. And they take a few steps and they fall down. They take a few more and they fall down. And we're on the sidelines. Come on, sweetheart, that's great. Get up again. We're not saying you're going to be flipping burgers at McDonald's for the rest of your life if you don't learn how to walk, or don't walk until it's a full, don't talk until it's a full sentence. Like, we tolerate and enjoy, not just tolerate, enjoy the process with younger children. And then we get this idea that too much is at stake. I've heard this so many times. I can't let my kid get a ticket. Too much is at stake. He's going to Cal on a rowing scholarship. And that's it's tough. It's like the story with my son. It's tough, but it's really our own anxiety that we have to learn how to tolerate. Kids' lives rarely get upended by one failure in self-regulation. And we have to have the same kind of. I was helping my granddaughter ride her bike today, my husband and I, and she falls off, and she's going to fall off. And, it's like Wendy Mogul's blessing of a skinned knee. It's like, yay, she fell off. You go, okay, you okay? And you move on with it. And if we could just take that out a little bit further, and not be afraid of the dog and not be afraid of falling off the bike, just the way we're not afraid of the fact that our child falls down, that's a huge favor to kids. And that's something we can do. You go in, if it's tough for you, go in another room, scream into a towel, do whatever you need to do, but don't get in the way of that learning process.
Oh, I love how you just termed it as a favor to our kids, because it's just, sometimes we just need to reframe that all. Madeline, you've also got a term in there that I absolutely thought I was so struck with and thought, my gosh, this is absolutely brilliant. Accumulated disability. You're going to read one chapter, everybody go to chapter 3, Accumulated Disability, the Real Dangers of Overparenting. Explain it, Madeline, because this is like the term of the decade, accumulated disability. Dr. Levine. Okay.
So what I've been talking about this whole time is, when a parent is overly enthusiastic about protecting their children to the child's detriment, and doesn't consider the long term, but is working on the short term, it becomes a series of getting active when you should be pulling back, and robbing the child over and over and over again of the capacity to learn. So you've thought of childhood, if you do this, as a snapshot. In this moment, your child's anxious and you're anxious, so you're going to help. Try not to think of it as a snapshot. Your child's a movie. It's a 30-year movie before.
What a great, oh my gosh, everybody write that one down. That's brilliant. Excuse me. That was like, wow, I got the visual.
Well, I think it's true. And so you asked, what is accumulated disability? It's the end result of all those unnecessary interventions. When you and I were in training, Michelle, there was no such thing as programs for kids who didn't know, emerging adulthood rehab programs, not necessarily for drugs, but because the kid doesn't know how to put a stamp on a letter, or boil an egg, or make a bed, or talk to his roommate,
or adulting schools.
Right, adulting, as our friend Julie Lithcott-Hames would say, that kids don't have that skill set anymore, because parents are not expecting kids to participate, right? It's more important to study more. So, moms who've worked all day long will say at the end of dinner, load the dishwasher, and the daughter will say, oh, wait, I've got an AP test tomorrow. And every child in America knows how to get out of loading the dishwasher. You just say, I have to study. And mom's making a mistake when she doesn't say the 5 minutes won't make much difference. It's more important to be part of a community than to get a 91 instead of a 90 on her test. So and I can give you a quick story. I have a parent who, a kid who I saw over a long period of time, couldn't sleep on his own. I use this story for a particular reason. And so parents slept with him, and then they got a bigger bed because he was growing up, and they still slept with him. And then he had a hard time in middle school, as you can imagine, because he couldn't regulate.
Surprise.
Right. And
or sleepovers can be tough.
Well, that's exactly where I'm going.
No,
couldn't go to a sleepover. Tried it. Mom gets a phone call middle of the night. He can't stay here. There's a reason I use this story, though. And that reason is my youngest son slept in my bedroom till he was 4 or so. So I want people to understand that any one thing you get wrong is not the end of the world, right? I was exhausted. I had 3 kids and a surgeon husband, and that was how I could manage. Sometimes we manage as best we can, and that's really important during COVID. During COVID, I'm going to digress for a minute. When I first started talking during COVID, I said, your goal is to make it through with your family reasonably intact. And people would say, oh, Dr. Levine, that's such a low bar, we're supposed to do other things. And I'm like, nope, your goal is to make, and now nobody thinks it's a low bar. Now it's become a high bar if you made it through reasonably intact. So, okay, I diverted from accumulated disability. Anyway, so the kid can't go for a sleepover, right? Then they try and send him to camp. He can't go to camp. They pick him up. Then he goes to college, and he can't sleep with another person in the room. So he drops out of college, and I get to see him again. That's accumulated disability.
Yeah.
This should have been stopped decades before, when the child was 2 or 3 or 4, not when he's 20. And you made a point before, Michelle, that you read depression is really tough. Later, it's pretty easy, and anxiety we've got great treatment for anxiety. So being aware of what you're looking for early is really important, and not spinning out this same accommodation. This is accommodation. My favorite accommodation story is the young lady who would not eat sauce, and her parents didn't give her sauce. And so her invitations to dinner went down and down and down when she was a kid, because the mom would call and say, don't give her sauce. It's like, what is that? Don't give her, she doesn't like it, she doesn't eat it, but it's an over concern with making your child vaguely uncomfortable. And if we're not vaguely uncomfortable a lot, you must know this, the mom who comes into the office and says, I cannot stand to see my child unhappy. And my answer is, if you can't stand to see your child unhappy, you're in the wrong business. You have got to be able to tolerate seeing your child unhappy. And that doesn't mean we go around making up fails for our children. We don't do that. Life will present enough for us to be able to let them manage.
Oh, you know, Madeline, those are exactly the kind of points why I love this book. You're really helping us realize it's now. And if we don't get it right now, we've made a major mistake with our children. I love the other thing. There's so many things I love, but I mean, I'm marked all over this. Your 2 PowerPoints that you have on the squiggly line, the squiggly path versus the straight path. And I think it goes right into sort of what you've been saying. If you can describe that, because I think it'll make us all breathe a little bit and realize where we're really, and the end product of what we're trying to do to help our kids. It's not going to be the cookie cutter approach and copying Mrs. Jones next door.
No. And the world has really changed. So like years ago, maybe it was helpful to be a straight A student. There was a time when Goldman Sachs only took people from the Ivy Leagues. That's not true anymore. There was a time when Facebook only took people from the Ivy Leagues. That's not true anymore. So there is a mythology, which is really, if you want to write another book to add to your 24, Michelle, go right ahead.
Madeline, I'm letting you do it.
The mythology of successful people have gone on this straight path. And so those are my 2 first slides. Every talk I've given, 400 talks, over 400. And I used to write the numbers in, but I've done it so many times. And the number of people, and there are always people who went straight, is somewhere between 1% to 10% of my audience. And it doesn't matter what kind of neighborhood I'm in. It doesn't matter if I'm at the local, fireman's breakfast or at Goldman Sachs in Hong Kong. Still, that number comes in 1 to 10. That means that all of us out there know that most people who become successful in life have a squiggly path to it. And if you can learn from your squiggly path, then you end up doing something you're really good at. I was a teacher. I was a terrible teacher. I really was a terrible teacher. But I was very good. Take my word, but I was in the South Bronx. It wasn't easy. But I was good at going home with the kids afterwards and sitting around the table with the kid and mom and trying to plot a way that that kid could get to school with books, because in that neighborhood, if you had books, it was not good. So there is this myth about what it takes to be successful. And I like it. My co-founder at Challenge Success is Denise Pope, and she is a Stanford graduate. And I'm a State University of New York at Buffalo graduate. And we get up together all the time on the stage and make a point of that for some people, that's really helpful. But the reality is, for the vast majority of people, getting into a school that's a good fit for you, finding your kind of tribe or your people who you can relate to. I think the most important part of college are the bull sessions that you had at 2 a.m, right? So yeah, I don't understand the prevalence and the persistence of that myth when it's just not true. And it's people still say to me, yeah, but I don't want to experiment on my child. Brown worked for me. I'm, a big shot. It worked for me. Why wouldn't it work for my child? It might, but so might 100 other schools.
So how do we help our kids, or what's your advice to the mom or dad right now that's going, but she's really suffering. She doesn't want to go back to school. She's really anxious. She's worried about how she's going to catch up. What's the advice, and how do you help that child?
So some kids are going to be having a very hard time right now. They've been told for 1.5 years that if they go outside, they're going to kill their grandmother, right? So like, how do you expect them to walk into school and sit down and do their times tables or geometry or whatever? So I think we need a big dose of support, a big dose of empathy, a big dose of kindness, compassion with our kids. We take it slow with them. We really work with the schools to make sure that they're not thrown right back into a stressful academic environment. If you're a teacher, you have to know what every kid in your class went through during COVID, because one kid lost a parent and another kid didn't know the difference. So, you know, if I was running the classroom, which you wouldn't want me to because I was really bad at it, but if I was, that would be the first 3 months of school would be, how'd it go? What can you tell us? What was good? What was bad? Not running right back into that educational paradigm that was outdated 15 years ago, let alone today. And what do you look for so you know a kid needs help? You look for persistence of symptoms. You look for something really different. So if your kid was always kind of happy-go-lucky and they don't get out of bed, not for one day, but a week or two, if they're crying, not for one day, but a week or two, you want to talk to your pediatrician who has seen 1,000 kids, not your 2 or 3, and get a recommendation or a referral for a mental health consult, which is so easy now because most of us are on Zoom, and places like Stanford or up here or UCLA by you or Child Mind Institute in New York, they're totally geared for helping parents figure out if their kid really needs just like a little lift or some real intervention.
Oh, I know there's so many parents that are so worried, and thank you. You're just so calming in your advice and so right on the mark. As you were writing Ready or Not, was there one little thing I love it, preparing our kids to thrive in uncertain and rapidly changing world. I love the subtitle as well. But was there one thing that struck you that as you were writing, you went, wow, I didn't think of it that way, or a story that hit you? What was your aha moment, Madeline?
My aha was around practice, because when I think, like most people, I thought there were resilient people and there are not so resilient people. There's probably some genetics in there, but you know, we're fond of saying genetics loads the gun and environment pulls the trigger. And so you may have a kid with a tendency towards anxiety. You will need to work at teaching them self-regulation or perseverance, any of those things, in the same way you approach anything else, like teaching Emery to ride her bicycle. She's going to have to practice, she's going to have to fail, she's going to have to get up again. That is perseverance. And to the extent to which the parent enjoys the practice, hey, you got better at that, or try it again, or what would you like to do next? All of those messages have a whiff of optimism around them.
Yes.
And that's what I learned from this, that I had overestimated the degree of genetic component to resilience, and that it was like anything else, practice it.
That is so, so wonderfully comforting to us all to know that, hey, we can make a difference on our children's lives.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you, this book is an absolute godsend. One of the most powerful chapters, Madeline, that struck me, and I actually had to sit and go get Kleenex. Chapter 10, your conclusion, the future-proof family. Yeah. I don't know if you remember the last thing you said, but I went, oh my gosh, this is the one that should be said over and over again. You said, if you had any words of wisdom or advice for parents in an age of uncertainty, I marked them. You said, spend half the amount of time you now spend on handling your children, hounding your kids about their grades and their test scores, and twice as much time cultivating a strong moral compass and appreciation of our common good. we'll all be called upon to be our best selves in our breathtaking, unpredictable, exciting, and yet to be written future. Any final words on that one, Madeline? That's just powerful.
Well, yeah. So just briefly, I have a garden out here, and during the time I had a stream of kids coming through who were depressed, who were anxious, who were whatever. And the most useful intervention I made by a long shot was giving them an activity that was of service, because they were all like, my life has no meaning, which teenagers feel anyway, right? And they're sitting home doing nothing. So I put together a list of, what do you mean you're doing nothing? You know, there are kids who need tutoring, there are seniors who need phone calls, there are people who are housebound who need food. Here, pick one, and then you're going to report to me. And all of my like psychological stuff didn't hold a candle to how much better kids felt when they felt that they had a purpose and they were being of service. So I do think that we underestimate the value of being of service to other people. We don't expect young kids to be involved in that. I don't understand why not. Kids feel great when they're being helpful to other people. And it's part of the architecture of a good person, is knowing that you can do something to help the world. Tikkun olam, from my Jewish background, it means to repair the world. And I think that's what we need. And you and I have grown up kids. And again, back to that movie, I can tell you that the grades they got, the schools they went to mean nothing compared to the people they married, the way they parent, and who they are in the world.
Oh, Madeline, now everybody knows exactly why I adore you so much and put you on that pedestal of the best of the best. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I would suggest everybody get a copy of this book, devour it, and mark it up like I've been doing. Thank you. I'm going to turn this over to you, Cheryl. It has been an absolute honor, Madeline.
Oh, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. This is a fabulous book. For those of you who don't have it, you need to get it. It's in paperback, so it's not going to break the bank. These are so many important lessons in here. We all want the best for our children. Madeline's book will help us get there. It'll help you. It'll help you with all these, this is such a stressful time for us as parents, but this book will help with that. We want the best for our kids, and this book is one way for us to provide that. Now, if there's any school out there, any religious organization, companies who have not purchased this book yet for your members and for your families, you need to do it. You really do. This book needs to be in the hands of every parent, and every PTA in this country needs to purchase this book for those family members. Religious organizations, you need to get this book for your members. Other businesses out there, you need to get this for your working parents. So please, please take a look at this book, buy it from Book Passage online, come into the store, give us a call. We're always happy to help you. And again, I just want to thank our two most inspirational authors today, Michelle and Madeline. I don't know where we would be literally without all your great, inspiring advice. You really help this world become a better place with all your great attributes. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Book Passage members out there. We'll see you in the store.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.